Hey, elite educators and purposeful parents. Today's video will help you understand how to talk about suicide and recognize the warning signs of suicide in children and teens. Hi, I'm Kimberly Deneen with Education Noir, where we provide the best tips and tools for Black educators and parents to level up their practice for student growth and achievement. In this video, I'm going to show you how to talk about suicide with your students and the warning signs to look for regarding suicide with students. The African American community was rocked last week with the death of Miss USA 2019, Cheslie Kryst, who died on January 30th. Her untimely death deeply moved me, and so I decided to start the conversation with this video. Let's get into the video. Cheslie Kryst had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in business administration, and a law degree. She practiced law and undertook pro bono work that resulted in the release of a guy who had been sentenced to life in prison on drug charges. She was Miss USA 2019 and proudly displayed her naturally curly hair and a more muscular build than the average pageant participant, thanks to her years as a Division I college athlete. She then changed careers as an entertainment correspondent and won 2 Daytime Emmy Awards in a short period of time. She shone like a diamond. Gayle King refers to her as walking sunlight. Before we get into the content of this video, I do want to say that this content is very sensitive. I have provided resources in the description, such as the Suicide Prevention Lifeline number and website. I also included articles in regards to Miss USA 2019, Cheslie Kryst, as well as some other articles that you may find helpful, including how to talk about death by suicide on social media or other media platforms. Growing up, I heard a lot of misinformation about suicide. Suicide was often spoken of as a sin, an unpardonable sin, or even as a criminal act, with the words committed being used. And I wanted to talk about that today. I had a personal experience with someone very close to me who tried to die by suicide. When I was age 4, I remember that my mother, I didn't see her take the pills, but I know later on I learned that she took a lot of pills and she tried to die by suicide. I remember very vividly in my mind at age 4, the paramedics coming into our apartment and taking my mother out on a stretcher to the hospital. So that's my personal experience with suicide. I wanted to also just talk about this because I believe that understanding how to talk about suicide and understanding the warning signs, the common warning signs of suicide will be beneficial for parents, guardians, and educators. First, let's talk about how we talk about suicide. There are some ways that you may have heard that are really politically incorrect and insensitive in some instances in talking about death by suicide. So there are a few ways that we can speak about suicide that are politically correct. We can say that someone died by suicide. For instance, when you may have seen reports or heard reports about Miss Cheslie Kryst and her untimely death, and most of the reports said that she died by suicide, right? Or she appeared to have died by suicide. So that's one way that we can describe this type of death. And another way that we can describe dying by suicide, we can also say that the person suicided. So these are the politically correct ways, the sensitive ways, in order to speak about death by suicide and with our students or in general. As adults who work with children and youth, we need to be able to talk about difficult things, and we also need to be able to recognize the common warning signs of suicide. Some of the common warning signs include making suicidal threats, preoccupation with death in conversation, writing, and drawings. I'm using notes, so just bear with me. Also, giving away belongings, withdrawing from family and friends, and having aggressive and hostile behavior. It is extremely important that you take all threats of suicide seriously. They must be reported to either your school counselor, your school social worker, and your administrator. Your school may have a crisis plan, so be sure that you're familiar with your crisis plan. If you're not sure that you have a crisis plan or a protocol for this, then you want to speak to your administrator or your school counselor or your school social worker for guidance. Other warning signs can include neglect in personal appearance, running away from home, risk-taking behavior such as reckless driving or being sexually promiscuous, a change in personality such as going from upbeat to quiet. Certain problems increase the chances of suicidal thoughts in children and teens. And these problems that can increase these thoughts include the following. And again, I'm using my notes, so bear with me. Depression or other mental health problems such as bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. A parent with depression or substance use disorder. Tried suicide before. So if that student has tried suicide before, that can increase the chances of suicidal thoughts. A friend, peer, family member, or a hero such as a music figure or a sports figure who recently attempted or died by suicide can cause these thoughts. So for me personally, because my mother attempted suicide, I grew up having suicidal thoughts. I never acted on them, but I had the thoughts, and I had them quite often. And continuing with the things that can cause suicidal thoughts, a disruptive or an abusive family life, a history of sexual abuse. And I have a few of these symptoms. Like I have a few of these from this list, from the previous list, from this list. Personally, growing up, I've had history of sexual abuse. A history of being bullied is also something that can increase the suicidal thoughts. Problems that may trigger a suicide attempt in children and teens include possession or purchase of a weapon, pills, or other means of inflicting self-harm, problems with drug or alcohol use, witnessing the suicide of a family member, problems in school, such as failing grades, disruptive behavior, or frequent absences. Also, the loss of a parent or close family member due to death or divorce. Legal or discipline problems. Stress caused by physical changes such as puberty or chronic illness or sexually transmitted infections. Withdrawing from others and keeping thoughts to themselves. And lastly, uncertainty surrounding sexual orientation. So, we're about to wrap this up. Unfortunately, many school systems do not provide professional development regarding this issue. However, and I'm reading from my notes, Black kids are 2 times more likely to die by suicide than their white counterparts, according to Ariel Shefdal, a researcher at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. That's a direct quote. I've been teaching for over 20 years and I have worked in 7 school systems. And I can only remember having professional development training on suicide 2 times. And one of them is at my current school district in Washington, D.C. According to an article in Time magazine, suicide rates have progressively increased among Black children and young adults in the last 2 decades. That's something to think about. Suicide has long been seen to be something for people of the middle age. However, in the U.S., among persons of color, those aged 30 and under are the most vulnerable, according to this same article in Time magazine. So if something feels or seems off to you regarding any of your students, even if it's a small thing, report it. It is really important that you act and make sure that you report this information to the appropriate people. And again, going based off of my expertise, I would say that would be your school counselor, your school social worker, and your administrators. But again, you may have a crisis plan and you may have someone specific that you should be reporting this information to. So follow up at your school, find out who that is, find out the protocol for this, so that if you need to report, you can do so quickly. With the untimely death by suicide of Cheslie Kryst, I could not let this moment go by without talking about suicide. In the description, you will find some helpful resources. There are articles. I think one of the articles that I included is about the death by suicide of Cheslie Kryst. And there are other helpful articles that I included that talk about suicide in general, as well as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline phone number and website. And there are also there's also some resources that I included on how to talk about suicide through social media or any other media, and how to do it with sensitivity. And I also included the dates for National Suicide Prevention Week. Many may not even know this exists. September is considered National Suicide Prevention Month. I included the dates for the National Suicide Prevention Week for September 2023, and all of that you can find in the description. So thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Continue to level up your practice for student growth and achievement, and I'll see you in the next video.